Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has left the White House early after a bitter exchange with US President Donald Trump. The two leaders were speaking ahead of a bilateral meeting when the conversation devolved into an extraordinary verbal spat.
President Zelensky had been expected to sign a critical minerals deal with the US while in Washington. Let's now cross to our North America Bureau Chief, Jade McMillan, who joins us from just outside the White House. Jade, it was an extraordinary scene in the Oval Office earlier this morning, Australia time. Take us through what happened.
Well, this was such a high-stakes meeting for Volodymyr Zelensky at a time when Donald Trump is trying to bring the war in Ukraine to an end, really upending US policy on this conflict in the process. The Ukrainian leader had travelled to Washington to discuss and then sign a critical minerals deal with the United States. He had been hoping as part of that process to secure some kind of security guarantees from the US president in the event that a peace deal with Russia is reached. The fear in Ukraine is that any kind of ceasefire could simply be seen by the Russian President Vladimir Putin as a pause, that he could use it to regroup, to strengthen and to attack Ukraine again in the future, unless there is that sort of security guarantee from the United States. So Volodymyr Zelensky used this meeting to push that point. He also argued against trusting Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump has resumed communications with the Russian leader. He said earlier this week that he believes that Mr. Putin would stick to any peace agreement, but Mr. Zelensky argued that the Russian president had a long history of going back on his word, and that is around the time what had started as a pretty cordial meeting really took a turn. The US Vice President J.D. Vance interjected. He accused Mr. Zelensky of being disrespectful and of being ungrateful for the support that the US has provided Ukraine so far. The Ukrainian president became defensive at times. Donald Trump got involved, and it ended up in a situation where both leaders were raising their voices, talking over the top of each other. Here is some of how it played out.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
And this is even more extraordinary given the setting for these remarks. Traditionally, what we see in the Oval Office from these sorts of meetings is the first few minutes of leaders exchanging warm words before those conversations go behind closed doors. Now, Donald Trump does take a different approach. He often invites questions from the reporters in the room, beginning really what becomes a mini press conference of sorts before those formal talks begin. But we have not seen anything quite like this with the other leaders, obviously, that Donald Trump has hosted so far. Such an openly hostile exchange between these two presidents at such a critical moment for Ukraine.
Yeah, as we said, it was unprecedented, and it's just extraordinary scenes coming out of the Oval Office there. Jade, now it's just gone after 4 p.m. there at Washington, D.C., where you are right now. We know that President Zelensky has left those talks early. Where does this now leave this critical minerals deal and, of course, this peace process between Ukraine and Russia?
Well, yeah, Volodymyr Zelensky had been scheduled to hold a lunch with Donald Trump at the White House before they both appeared at a joint press conference where it was expected that they could be signing that critical minerals deal. Mr. Zelensky, though, abruptly left the White House. The White House has said that that deal was not signed. Now, Donald Trump posted to social media. He says, I have determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved, because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. The president goes on to say, I don't want advantage, I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he is ready for peace. Now, the White House followed up that post with a statement which said that the president and his vice president would never allow the American people to be taken advantage of. We also heard from Trump ally, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham at the White House. He said that he had spoken to Volodymyr Zelensky ahead of this meeting, that he told him not to take the bait, in his words. He went on to argue that perhaps the Trump administration could no longer deal with Mr. Zelensky, and that perhaps the Ukrainian leader should resign. Democrats, on the other hand, here in the United States, have condemned what has happened. Senator Jack Reed has issued a statement saying that this was a political ambush and a shameful failure of American leadership that would only benefit Vladimir Putin. Now, Mr. Zelensky has also posted to social media. He made a point of thanking the US president, the American people, and the US Congress. Those comments obviously coming after he was accused in the Oval Office publicly of being ungrateful. But Mr. Zelensky has cancelled a number of other public engagements that he had lined up here in Washington today. So we're not sure when we might hear from him next. This Oval Office spat obviously sending shockwaves through Europe, what really was supposed to be a significant step towards improving the relationship between Ukraine and this new Trump administration, instead breaking down spectacularly. So what that is going to mean for Ukraine, really still not clear. That minerals deal obviously has not been signed at this point, but where this could lead in terms of ongoing support for Ukraine from the United States in both the short term and the long term, there would be a lot of concern about what impact this might have had.